American submarines move with tense, silent precision. The men inside are cramped, the air thick with anticipation. They strain against their periscopes, their eyes scanning the surface, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. As some Japanese vessels begin to maneuver to evade the relentless dive-bombing attacks, they sail right into the traps set by the American subs. Torpedoes are launched from the hidden depths, silent predators racing toward their targets. They find their marks with deadly accuracy, tearing into the hulls of Japanese ships and adding another layer of carnage to the already overwhelming scene. The element of surprise from below the surface adds to the chaos and further tips the scales. Amid this large-scale madness, countless small acts of heroism become the invisible backbone of the American effort. Pilots instinctively shield their wingmen from enemy fire, taking risks that defy self-preservation. On the carrier decks, sailors work under a constant rain of bombs and shrapnel, risking everything to rearm and refuel the next wave of planes. Medics move through the smoke and debris, their resolve unshakable as they pull the wounded to safety, treating injuries in the most hellish of conditions. Every man involved, from the highest-ranking admiral to the youngest sailor, knows this fight is about more than just personal survival. They are fighting for the future. This is the turning point of the Pacific War. As the morning wears on, the results of the American assault become brutally clear. The pride of the Japanese fleet, the carriers Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, are burning wrecks, crippled beyond any hope of immediate repair. Their flight decks are twisted blackened steel, their hulls gushing smoke. The tide of the battle, once thought impossible to turn, is shifting. But the fight is far from over. The carrier Hiryu remains a potent threat, its surviving planes preparing for a desperate counterstrike that could still devastate the American fleet and snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Across the water on the decks of the Enterprise, Hornet, and the damaged but still fighting Yorktown, American sailors brace themselves. Their nerves are taut, their bodies exhausted, but their resolve is hardened by the devastation they have witnessed and inflicted. They know the next wave is coming. The Battle of Midway has entered its most critical phase. The outcome hangs precariously in the balance. Every explosion, every maneuver, and every second spent in the air or on the deck will continue to shape the destiny of the Pacific, and indeed, the world. By mid-afternoon, the sky over the Pacific was a canvas of smoke and fire. The plumes from the burning Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, merged into a single, vast, acrid cloud that hung heavy over what remained of the once mighty fleet. But the battle was far from over. Through the shimmering heat haze on the horizon, a new threat emerged: the ominous silhouettes of Hiryu's torpedo bombers. They flew low, slicing through the waves with deadly precision. This was Hiryu, the last Japanese carrier, launching a desperate, vengeful strike. High above, Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey and his pilots instantly grasped the danger. They knew these planes were aiming to even the score. Below them, on the deck of the USS Yorktown, chaos erupted. Alarms screamed alive as lookouts spotted the incoming torpedo planes. Ensign George Gay, already in the air, banked his fighter sharply to intercept, diving headlong into the fray. The sky exploded into a symphony of destruction. The roar of machine guns, the whine of stressed engines. It was a deadly ballet between predator and prey. On the American carriers, anti-aircraft gunners opened up, their tracer rounds stitching lines of light across the smoke-filled air. The first wave of Hiryu's dive bombers broke through. They struck the Yorktown with terrifying accuracy. Bombs slammed into the flight deck, unleashing a hellstorm of shrapnel fire and splintered steel. Sailors scrambled for cover, shouting orders over the deafening roar of explosions. The massive carrier shuddered violently as a bomb tore through its deck, igniting fuel lines and turning parked aircraft into infernos. The choking smell of burning oil and gunpowder filled the air, enveloping the crew in a thick, blinding haze. The Yorktown, a veteran of the Coral Sea, was fighting for its life, its crew battling fires and flooding even as the attack raged on. The Japanese pilots pressed their attack with a ferocity born of desperation. Torpedoes dropped into the water, churning white wakes as they raced toward the Yorktown's hull. The ship's captain, Elliot Buckmaster, ordered a hard turn, trying to comb the torpedo tracks, but the carrier was too large, too slow. 2 torpedoes struck the port side, ripping massive holes below the waterline. The Yorktown listed heavily, its power failing, its engines grinding to a halt. The order was given: abandon ship. The valiant carrier, which had absorbed so much punishment, was finally silenced, dead in the water. But its sacrifice had bought precious time. Now, it was America's turn to answer. A call went out for the remaining dive bombers, and one name was on everyone's lips: Lieutenant Dick Best. He had already distinguished himself that morning by helping sink the Akagi. Now, he was being called upon to finish the job. Leading a patched-together squadron of SBD Dauntless dive bombers, he climbed into the sky, his eyes fixed on the last target. "Hear you." They found her quickly. Best and his men pushed their planes into a near-vertical dive, hurtling towards the Japanese carrier. The sky around them erupted with anti-aircraft fire. Puffs of black smoke from exploding shells dotted the air, and tracers zipped past their canopies. It was like flying through a curtain of steel. Best held his dive, his focus absolute, the carrier growing larger and larger in his sights. Every movement was a calculation against death itself. At the perfect moment, he released his bomb. Time seemed to stretch. For a few agonizing seconds, the 1,000-pound bomb tumbled through the air. Then, impact. A massive explosion ripped through Hiryu's flight deck, right near the forward elevator. A geyser of flame and debris shot hundreds of feet into the air. The explosion buckled the deck, turning it into a twisted, burning wreck and igniting the aircraft being prepared for the next strike. Following Best's lead, the other Dauntless pilots rained down their deadly cargo. More bombs slammed into the carrier. One after another, explosions tore through her hull. Fires raged uncontrollably, consuming planes, ammunition, and fuel. On Hiryu's bridge, her captain, Tomeo Kaku, shouted orders, but it was useless. The once disciplined fleet was in disarray. Smoke blocked all vision. Radios crackled with confused and panicked messages. The heart of the Japanese Navy was being torn out. American pilots, their fuel and ammunition running low, refused to let up. They circled and strafed the burning wreck, ensuring the fires could not be contained, ensuring Hiryu could not recover. From the decks of the U.S. carriers Enterprise and Hornet, exhausted crews watched the spectacle. Every secondary explosion from the distant burning carrier brought a cheer. They were battered and bruised, but they were winning. Even beneath the waves, the battle continued. American submarines like the USS Nautilus had been shadowing the Japanese fleet, waiting for an opportunity. They launched torpedoes at cruisers and destroyers attempting to flee or protect their burning carriers. The ocean itself had become a killing field, a three-dimensional battlefield of aircraft, ships, and submarines. As the sun began to set on that fateful day, June 4, 1942, the last of Japan's frontline carriers was a blazing, sinking pyre. Hiryu, the flying dragon, slipped beneath the waves, taking with her the hopes of the Japanese Empire. The tide of the Pacific War had turned. In a matter of hours, a desperate gamble had transformed into one of the most decisive naval victories in history. The men of the U.S. Navy, pilots, sailors, gunners, were exhausted, scorched, and wounded. But as they watched the enemy fleet burn on the horizon, they knew they had achieved the impossible. They had met a superior force and broken its back through courage, skill, and a little bit of luck. The momentum of the war, once firmly in Japanese hands, now shifted to the United States. The Battle of Midway was over, and its outcome would echo through history, a testament to the fact that even against overwhelming odds, victory is possible. The sun bled into the horizon on June 4, 1942, painting the sky in hues of orange and red, a stark contrast to the grim scene below. The waters around Midway Atoll were no longer pristine. Instead, they were a graveyard, scarred with plumes of thick black smoke, slicks of oil that shimmered like dark rainbows, and the splintered debris of once mighty warships. The air was heavy, filled with the acrid metallic smell of fire and burnt metal, a suffocating reminder of the day's brutal whirlwind devastation.